Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
And hello, this is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth on KUNX, the UNX Digital Broadcasting. And tonight we have a special guest returning after several years with a new book. At the age of 4, Cheryl Lynn Carter had her first paranormal experience while visiting her aunt's farm. Soon she realized she had a unique sixth sense and was able to interact with those on the other side. This had a profound effect on her life, instilling in her a sense of purpose, which throughout the years has manifested itself and maintained itself as a vision through several mediums: as a writer, a photographer, a researcher, an explorer. These in order to share these stories with the world. Cheryl's travels have taken her down the path of the unknown, where many are just waiting to be heard and longing to be remembered. She has investigated strictures with subtle undertones and artistic renderings that beg to be understood. Writing and photographs. Through writing and photographs, she expresses their messages for all to hear. As a ufologist, Cheryl is a member of MUFON and CE-5. She served as a consultant for Thomas Conwell's book, They Are Here, Central U.S. UFOs. Cheryl is a freelance journalist, writing for Paranormal Underground Magazine and Body Spirit Guide. In addition, she is the author of several books, including Dimensions, Mysterious Triangles of the U.S., and co-author of Digging into Skinwalker Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch, the Basin, the Basin Files. And her newest book, Chosen. And Cheryl Lynn Carter, it's a pleasure to welcome you back to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Good to be back.
Let's begin at the beginning, as we often do. You write that at 4 years old, you had an experience on your aunt's farm that not only was life-changing, but made you realize, as that famous line is in the great movie, The Sixth Sense, that you can see dead people. I don't mean to trivialize it, but can you tell us a little about your early childhood and about that visit to your aunt's farm and what actually happened?
Because I couldn't just see them, I could hear them. I could speak to them. And I didn't understand. So I went with my grandma out to their farm. And in the morning, everybody had gone downstairs, and I'm still up in the bedroom. And I woke up, and there was a room next to ours, and it had a bunch of old, like a storage room, bunch of trunks and boxes.
Sure.
Stuff little kids like to go play in. So I went sneaking into the room, and the floor was creaking. I go, oh no, they're going to hear me. So I'm tiptoeing into the room, and I'm opening things up, and there's just clothes in there, hats in this one. Then I saw this beautiful trunk in the corner with ornate. And I says, well, that's pretty nice. Let me go see that. And when I got there, there was a little boy standing behind it. He was about my age. And I'm thinking, why is there a little boy up here? And then I noticed I could see through him. And he reached out his hand to touch me, and it was really cold. And I ran downstairs as fast as I could. Never told anybody. Never told anybody.
That would have been my next question. You were okay keeping that to yourself?
Well, I had to. I thought it was crazy. I go, there's a little boy up there. I can't see him. Yep. Who's going to believe me? Because then later on that weekend, I'm outside on a swing, and I heard somebody calling my name. And it sounded like Grandma. So I run in the house and I says, what do you want? I didn't call you. I said, you called me. No, I didn't. Go out and play. So I went out. I heard my name again. I said, okay, I heard you this time. I didn't call you. My aunt says, oh, sometimes the wind makes sounds. And I said, but it's not windy.
Yeah.
That was great grandma calling my name, which I didn't know who that was at the time. So a whole lot happened that weekend.
It sounds like it. Again, for a 4-year-old, this is your life. You're not comparing it to somebody else's. You don't know formally that this is non-standard. You know if on either side of your parents' family lines, there are or were sensitives or individuals who may have had this kind of ability as well.
It comes up the maternal side. I know my mother denied it, but grandma had it, so she had to have it too. And great grandma had it, and great grandma's father was a medicine man, so it came down that way. Yeah.
Do you remember the first time that you talked to your grandmother about this? Or did you ever talk to her about this?
Well, we would just, there were times that I would start knowing things were going to happen before they happened. And grandma knew things were going to happen before they happened. So I just figured that's what happens. People do that. People just know that,
Yeah. Do you remember coming to
the funny thing was, now I'm a little kid and we're walking down the street. We were going to go up the street to go feed the billy goats that were up by the factory. And the one guy was by his house and he's waving to us. And I looked at him and I said, oh, Grandma, I says, he goes over and has tea with the lady across the street. No, this man's married. He goes over and has tea with the lady across the street. I says, and he kisses her. My grandma's go, shh. How did I know that?
Was there a point where you really realized maybe something that came up in school or something a friend said or something that you said that got a reaction that caught you off guard? The first time that you realize, this thing that I have that I can do, that I can see, I really shouldn't talk about this because this is something that isolates people or, makes other people think they're strange, or it's kind of an adult concept, but do you remember putting it together at a certain point?
Yeah, because I kind of remember telling kids about, up the street, there's the Karras mansion, and there's a little girl ghost over there, and she talks to me, and they kind of go, what? So then I know, okay. No, nobody else talks about this. I'll just keep the little girl to myself,
As you're growing up, this part of your life aside, what were the subjects that really interested you in school, out of school? And while you were still an official kid, say under 12 years old, did you have a thought of what you wanted to do when you became an adult?
Not really, but I remember I was always interested in Stonehenge. I don't know why. That was something that I liked. I would read all about Stonehenge. And my father used to come home from work with Popular Mechanics magazines. And at the back of the magazines, they always had stories about UFOs. And I would read those and I said, well, this is interesting too.
Is that where you first came upon the subject of UFOs or first?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did your dad take the subject seriously, or is it something you guys talked about at all?
Well, I was just, I would read it, but I didn't talk about it. And then this is a crazy thing because he never talked about this stuff. And he came home from work one night. It was probably 7:00. And he says, he just says this to me and then walks away. You should see. He goes, I just came out of the factory, up the street. He says, a spaceship landed in 9th Street Park, and these 3 little creatures came out. And then he walked in the kitchen to have dinner. And that was it. I'm going, what did you just say? Now, that's not something he ever talked about. So I think he must have really saw that,
You knew your dad, of course, very well. You think he was...
He wouldn't talk about those things, yeah. But he just said, okay, I'm done. I'm going to go eat now.
He wasn't joking. It was...
No.
He just... Wow.
Because I said, we never talked about that stuff.
At what point did you become interested enough in the subject of UFOs, separate from your abilities on really with this other
more in high school when I could read more stuff about it. When you could find more things to read. Yeah.
Did you have the means to go to college or university at all?
Yeah, but there wasn't really any kind of classes that we had at our school that you could do. Nowadays there's really good classes to get into stuff. Yeah, we didn't have good classes like that, but I would read a lot on my own.
So where did life take you at that point as you started to get old enough to look at the job market and realize you had to make a living doing something? And at the same time that you had paths you wanted to follow completely separate.
Yeah, I got into retail. I don't know how that happened.
Pay the bills. That's how it happens.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was interesting. I'll tell you, it was interesting.
Was there any particular UFO or paranormal books when you started to read those books that stayed with you or really made a difference, or ones that you would recommend even still, or ones that you think about that because they had a special impact on you, the author?
I like to read Chariots of the Gods and stuff about Edgar Cayce.
Yeah. I was in my 20s when I started to read Edgar Cayce, and up until that point in my life, just the word a medium or a seer or a channeler, I was pretty sarcastic and just didn't take it seriously, and would think, well, you roll your eyes back in your head, you talk in a funny voice, and you say you're a 5,000-year-old disembodied spirit, and then you collect the money.
Yeah, I've heard those people, and I go, oh.
Sure. And of course they're there. But when I started to read the reports of Cayce's readings with people, all scrupulously reported and recorded over the decades, the incidence of accuracy was just over the top.
I know.
And in subtle ways as well as unsubtle ways. And, your reactive mind, the healthy skeptic inside of all of us, and we all should have one, is immediately trying to dismantle the thing because you're uncomfortable with the results. And you either walk away from it or realize there's something new here to learn. And of course, he really was, I think, the greatest American psychic, certainly that I'm aware of. But in that sense, he certainly changed my life a bit. We'll get into some of your photography in the second half of the show, but did you come from a family where your dad took, snapshots of the family growing up, or was...
No, nobody did pictures there, so this was just my thing, yeah.
When did you start to realize, and I know we talked about it a bit before we went on the air, but you became an investigator of UFO cases, and that does involve photography on location.
And I've always been a paranormal investigator too, so you're taking pictures at all the locations you go to, trying to catch things,
And the fact is, whatever one's job is, if it does involve technical photography, just the facts, ma'am, telling the story, we all think of police photographers, that kind of thing. But at a certain point, it started to mutate a little bit for you and became something more. You saw that it was allowing you to begin to experience the difference between looking and seeing, and that there was a creative side of this that you wanted to begin to explore. Did you do it kind of a definite conscious decision, or you just found yourself sort of drifting into taking photographs
I was at some haunted location, and I just kind of looked in the corner one time, and well, actually it was a rocking chair, and there was a spider web hanging down from it. And I said, oh my gosh, that would make a great black and white photo, because I like Ansel Adams. He always did the. No. And then I was at another location, and there was a cracked window, and I said, and you could see all the little lines going out from the glass, and I said, that would make a great black and white photo. Yeah. So I just started looking for things. Or if you find out an old tree, old gnarly shaped tree, and you turn that into black and white, just.
I'd like to go over some of your books. This is not in the order that they're written, but very briefly. And your newest book, and your first book was which of these?
Whispers Beyond the Grave.
Okay, that would make sense. How did you make the decision to start writing the book, and what was your strategy? You've got to. This
is funny. The very first medium I ever went to, I didn't know if my job was being eliminated, and I would get a reading from somebody, but I didn't know if I believed in anybody. So I found this little magazine at the store, and I'm going through. There's all these psychics. I kept going back and forth, and I kept stopping on this one. I said, I'm going to go see this Tony person. And man, I swear, everything she ever told me, she was 110% right. And one day we're sitting there, and she says, you're going to write something. And I start laughing. I says, what, a letter? And she says, no, you're going to write a book. And I says, well, who would want to read a book? Well, you could tell about, things that happened to you and all this. And I said, well, maybe. I said, I'm going to write a book, huh? She goes, several. Well, she's right. I've written 10 now. And so this is the story about when I was a 4-year-old and how things went, how I met my great grandma, and then different places that I went that spirits talked to me. That's what Whispers Beyond the Grave is.
Cheryl, I don't know if anybody will ever determine this answer scientifically, but do you feel, deduce, know, sense, whichever word you want to choose, that what you're able to do here can only be explained by some kind of mystical understanding? I
don't know how I do this. People go, how do you do it? I don't know. I just do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I again, the other possibility is that it's science on some level that we haven't calibrated the rules for, and being human beings, let's make fun of something until we understand it.
Yeah. Because I have people say, well, teach me how to do it. I says, I can't teach you because I don't know how I do it.
Yeah. That's often.
In
so many words.
You can't read a book or watch videos and do this because that's not how it works.
I know you understand the dynamic of somebody out there who, is watching this show and not only has no experience of the kind that you're talking about, but thinks it's a lot of hogwash.
Sure.
Most people will at least be civil and polite and maybe think, gee, this person thinks they're in contact with those who have been here before. I wonder, what kind of mental illness they have, but I'll be nice. But then every once in a while, somebody gets nasty on us. And I don't believe you. You're a con lady. Have you ever had to deal with that level of inappropriate behavior, really?
Oh yeah, because my favorite thing to do when I'm investigating is I take my analog recorder, because a picture is great, but I want to hear your voice.
Yes.
Picture doesn't tell me anything. Now, if I've got your voice on tape, doesn't that prove that something talked to me? No, this person would come after me and said, "No, you made up the tape. You went on YouTube. You went on YouTube and you found exactly the voices you wanted and the names, and you put it all together." Well, I don't even know how to do that, but that's what he was accusing me of, and I don't really care. But
yeah,
I had other people standing there with me when I was recording it, so they know I didn't make it up.
My best sense of that is that behind that kind of behavior, there's almost always somebody who is really anxious that if you're right, then everything they thought they knew is now open to question. And frankly, I'd rather make fun of you than deal with the possibility that, for me, over the decades, if anything, it's given me a little bit more sense of compassion for people who are really threatened by this world of non-standard activity behavior, the unexplained overall. Besides your experiences interacting with these presences, these beings, these souls who are no longer here, have you chronicled the experience of other people who have had similar life experiences to you?
Yes, and like my new book, it's like that's what these people did. They've seen these people from another world, another dimension, who knows where they come from. They've talked to them. It's not the same as paranormal investigating, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, no question about that.
I'd rather speak to ghosts, let me tell you.
Let's dig in a little bit on that. Again, if this is something that is not part of your life, like I'm a good example of that, I'm really curious, once the ice is broken, so to say, and you are in communication, is it all kind of serious, thoughtful, philosophical, or is there a lightness to it, like a conversation with a kid or an older person that just has its own rhythm and isn't particularly profound, but charming?
That's what I like about, some people think I'm weird. When we go somewhere, I walk into the room or the building and I say, "I hope it's okay if we came here. We didn't tell you we were coming." And they look at me like I'm crazy. And I said, "Do you just walk into somebody's house? That's what we just did."
Yes.
I says, "And this is why they talk to me and they don't talk to you." And you would never hear me say, "Can you knock on the wall or move something?" I said, "Do you do that at your friend's house?" "Well, no." I said, "Then why are you doing that?" I says, "Ask them questions. Just have a conversation." And every time I go to a haunted location, one of the spirits already knows I'm coming. And they start talking to me a couple days before I get there.
Whoa.
Because they're excited that I'm coming. So then I got to go see where the heck they are. Yeah.
Do you think that, again, this is purely subjective, do you think that certain presences remain at certain locations for very specific reasons? Maybe an unresolved aspect of their life that happened at that location, or that ultimately they move on to wherever it is we move on to once we get unstuck in the physical universe. I know you know what I mean, but I'm not sure how better to express it.
I think there's all different reasons. Like when I investigate at prisons, I don't think those guys want to move on because they don't know where they're going. It might not be a good place, so they're going to stay where they are there, and they're probably happy. but there's some spirits don't know they're dead. So that's why they're still there. And then there have been times when one spirit is keeping that spirit prisoner there. So there's many reasons. Or maybe they want to tell somebody something before they can move on, which is what happened to me at Waverly Hills. This man started talking to me before I got there. He goes, I have a problem. I need you to talk to me. And I go, where are you? Well, he was in the death tunnel. And so I says, okay, what's going on? And he said, my wife and I were here. She had tuberculosis. She was really suffering, and she wanted me to put her out of her misery. So I put a pillow over her face. Now, I know she went to heaven. Where am I going to go? He was stuck there the whole time, and I didn't know what to tell him. Yeah. These are the kind of conversations I have, and I don't have people knocking on the... Yeah, and I says, well, I think God will understand you didn't do that out of hate. You did it out of love. So I think you'll go to heaven too. But see, or somebody wants to tell you how they died because nobody was there when they died, or somebody killed them and they want you to know, and they tell me their story and then they move on. But it's like when people are investigating, why don't you try to talk to spirits?
Cheryl, can you give us
an example? Lights and stuff,
Yeah. Can you give us an example of a particularly poignant one or two of these kinds of conversations that, well, they needed to make their peace with a personal tragedy or an accident, or again, we know in life the value of somebody simply being a good listener. Unfortunately, many people don't know that, but it can be the most important gift you give somebody at a certain point. And in hearing out some of the... And do you have a preferred term, spirit, soul, being, for these non-living entities?
Spirits.
Okay. Can you give us one or two examples of particularly memorable exchanges in that spirit that you've had?
Well, there was a cemetery here in Michigan, and there was a story about a lady in white that would cross the road and cars were running off the road. And I didn't believe that story because everybody makes up lady in white stories. But I went to the cemetery and I saw her standing on the top of the hill. And I go, who are you? Who are you? And she kind of directed me to a grave, and it said Sarah Dickinson, 18 years old.
Oof.
So I started, and I'm going, she's got a husband, she's got a family. I didn't see anything there. So then I kind of Googled, and I went to Ancestry, and I found her on somebody's family tree. And she had married a guy, and he went off to the Civil War. And they had only been married a month, and she went to sleep and never woke up. I mean, who knows? Was it the flu back then, or who knows what it was?
Sure.
And
wow.
She promised she would wait for him to come home. So she did not know she was dead. She was still waiting for Matthew to come home. So I had to go there probably 4 times. I didn't want to run out and say you're dead because that would scare a spirit. So we kept, talking and stuff. And she goes, where's Matthew? And I didn't know what to tell her. So finally she says, I don't know. I keep waiting for him. And I says, well, he's not coming. One day I got frustrated. I said, he's not coming. Why is he not coming? I says, because he died. Oh, and I said, and so did you. And I didn't mean to say that. And she goes, oh. And I said, but that's okay. I know where he is. And people say, go to the light. Well, if you told me to go to the light, I'd be scared. I never say that. I said, well, see that bridge over there and the beautiful sunshine over on the other side? I said, I bet if we go over there, I can call Matthew and he'll meet you there. So she saw it, and I says, Matthew, can you come? And he came to the other side of the bridge, and he's wearing his Civil War uniform. and she saw him and she ran over and met him.
Oof.
I still get chills from that.
Yeah. Do you, well, my experience is that people faking non-standard or paranormal or UFO related experiences are very much the exception to the rule. When they're out there, we often hear about them, as they say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and trying to fool people often draws attention if the person can be exposed. Have you ever encountered anyone who you feel tried to fool you for some reason and claimed to have an experience or related something to you that you intuitively felt was not true? I'm asking only because it's rare in my experience. It certainly happened relative to UFO cases, but very rarely. Have you ever come up against that, Sarah?
Not with UFOs, but if people talk about paranormal things, and I know when somebody's lying. I don't say anything, but I know when a person's lying. It's just something that I know. But the UFO cases, no. Anybody that's ever told me a story, I believe it was true.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say, I tend to agree with you. We have in the images that you sent several very intriguing ones, and I just want to run through them with you and have you think out loud on them. This I can introduce by saying this is part of a notebook kept by Sergeant Jim Peniston, one of the authentic Rendlesham Forest RAF Bentwaters UFO witnesses from December of 1980. And this page as well are part of the symbols that Jim had claimed that he saw on the object that he encountered in the forest with Sergeant John Burroughs. I have to say, for years, I was really circumspect about this, and I was wrong, I think, in great part about some specifics, certainly in my take on the case. But you have them here as two examples of an important case. What was it that drew you to the Rendlesham Forest case, and why did you choose those images to underscore a point?
I've just been always fascinated with that case for some reason. I don't know why. And I had to just, and I got his book. I don't know if you've read his book that came out a couple of years ago. I was fascinated by the book. So then I says, okay, let me dig more into this. Well, he also had a hypnotic regression, which that's what I found very interesting, because everybody says, oh, this didn't really happen. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, right after it happened, they were taking him back to headquarters, and he's writing his notes down, and he didn't say anything about he saw a ship. None of that got in his notes. He didn't say anything about that. He just, we investigated a down craft, didn't find anything. Never mentioned that. So they get back there, and they start questioning him, and he says, well, I want to say interrogated me. He says there were, Army officials, and then there were these guys in black suits. Men in black. And they start asking me about the binary code. Now, I didn't say anything about the binary code because I didn't say anything about a crap, but they knew about the binary code. And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. And so during his hypnotic regression, he says that they gave him a shot to make him talk. Sodium pentothal. Because they wanted to make him talk.
Well, sodium pentothal it makes it easier for an outsider or for an individual to influence your thinking. It's sodium amythol or some other derivative. That's what you're talking about, that loosens people's tongues, so to say.
Well, this is what they were influencing him. Because they did not want him to remember the code, but he had already written that down in his notebook, and they didn't know. And
that's
so someone was I think it was Linda Moulton Howe was interviewing, and she says, so what happened during your regression? And he says, Well, she says, tell me about the code. And he says, I can't talk about that. Can't talk about that. And she says, well, who said you can't talk about it? They did. And she says, who? The men in the black suits, Well, what do you remember? And he goes, the nursery rhyme. The nursery rhyme? What nursery rhyme? Mary had a little lamb was fleeced for white as snow. Everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. They inserted that into his brain instead of the binary code.
Fascinating. One of the things that Jim took criticism for, unfairly, I think, was how could anybody remember all of those ones and zeros in the right order?
Right. I'm fascinated.
Page after page after page, and
16 pages.
Makes sense in code. I don't know how many of you remember seeing a movie, it's got to be 15, 20 years ago now, Rain Man, with Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman. Hoffman playing the institutionalized brother who...
he was a savant.
Yes. And there is a moment where, remember the childhood game, I'm going to date myself on this, of pickup sticks? Mm-hmm. It's like several hundred colored sticks about the size of spaghetti, but thicker.
I used to play those.
And he's got one, and he drops it on the floor, and the sticks go all over the place. And Hoffman's character, he says something like, he looks at it and goes, 267, and then just walks away. And that's how many there are. The human mind, like the universe, is not only stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine. And even if it sounds impossible, it happens. It happens in human beings around the world. And we still can't fully explain it. It's intimidating, it's wonderful, it's unnerving, but it's real. And, more power to Jim. I hope he's doing well. He certainly deserves it.
I had an incident where something downloaded binary code into my brain, and I cannot write it down. I don't know how he wrote it down. I have tried. It's like I'm not supposed to write it down. I know it's in my head, but I don't know why I have it. I don't feel different.
That term, download.
That's what I felt like. It's just coming into my brain. Yeah.
As opposed to I was told or I remembered. It's literally, the way people describe it, like a block of information.
Yeah, I saw all the numbers, they were just rolling down. Yeah, that's why I say download. It was just.
And that once it's there, you either can sort it out or not, but it's literally, it's a good term. It is kind of dumped, and people are often transformed by it. Talking about, well, we'll get to that with when we discuss your last book. Tell us about this illustration and why you included it.
Well, that's from the aerial school in Zimbabwe.
Yep.
And a UFO landed right in the schoolyard during recess, and all these grade school children were out there looking at this craft. And some of the little creatures got out, and they kind of floated through the air and came right into the schoolyard to the children. And they were talking to them telepathically and showing them another download of scenes and pictures of things children don't understand, like the world where there's no water in the lakes, the trees are all burnt up, and the children did not understand what they were showing them. And they says, well, you're still young, you can save the world from looking like this. That's what they told them.
Mm-hmm.
So the children go back after recess, and they're trying to tell the teacher, and the teacher says, quit fooling around. She went outside, nothing. And they go, so they go home, and they're trying to tell their parents, and their parents go, what's wrong with you? And some of them, because they're in Africa, they don't even know about UFOs. And they thought these creatures were some kind of creature that comes to you in the night and steals your soul. So they were really scared. So then Dr. John, Dr. John Mack from Harvard heard about it, and he went there and he wanted to talk to the children. And he had every one of them separated, and he wanted them all to draw pictures of what they saw.
Yep.
And that picture was from Emily Krim. And she was one of the little girls there. And she used to have pigtails. And that's a drawing that she did of a little girl with a zipper on her mouth because she couldn't talk about what she saw for years. For years, she could not talk about it.
For anybody that's not familiar with the Zimbabwe school case that Cheryl's just brought up, it's a very important one and extremely well documented. All of these young people not only were fully articulate in laying out their accounts, all of them really dovetailing into each other's with, this was not something they rehearsed or was done for lark. Talk about impacting on you for the rest of your life. Dr. Mack indeed made several trips to Zimbabwe and brought with him a wonderful filmmaker named Randall Nickerson. And Randy became so dedicated to this project and making public awareness of it far wider than it had been.
The film is great. Yeah, people should watch this film. Yeah.
Yes, more than a decade on one of the finest documentaries in the whole UFO world. I think I'm not sure if it's still running and if it is on Netflix or not. But the witnesses were reapproached, a number of them as adults. And the accounts that they gave in every case were spot on with their original accounts. Nobody changed anything. Nobody amplified or, added.
Yeah, I just found the YouTubes a couple of years ago when I wrote the book. They're still out there.
Yeah. And this iconic picture also by one of the kids. None of these kids, it should also be said here, Dr. Mack did full, psychological breakdowns and analysis. They were school kids. Nothing different than a random sampling of young people, in an educational institution from elsewhere. But this is a case I still find poignant, fascinating, and quite moving. In fact, as we were talking about before we went on the air, Emily Trim, who did that first drawing and very courageously became quite public about this, passed away last year.
Yes.
Much too young. But right up until the end was right as supportive as she could be of the work, of her account and supporting the accounts of her friends. As often as I encounter cases, and you say to yourself, here's some person who was living their life, minding their own business, preoccupied with something of small consequence or big consequence, and bang, they look up and there it is, or there they are. The object, the vision, the thing that is going to function as kind of a personal BCAD in your life, something that you measure forward and back from. In your life, Cheryl, of really digging into the paranormal and UFO investigations, some of which are very unnerving for investigators, as well as, of course, the experiencers. Are there one or two that stick in your mind as kind of being two of your personal AC, AD, and BCs that were so profound, either upon reflection or when they were happening, that you keep coming back to them in your mind? I think you know what I mean.
Well, I said that this binary code thing, I had gone to Utah for an event, and I went out to the stop sign by Skinwalker Ranch at the gates. And after this download thing, this same voice that did the download said, "Pick up that rock." And I start laughing, and my friend said, "What you laughing about?" I said, the voice said, "Pick up that rock," and we're on a gravel road. So I look around, and the gravel's all chunky. And then I found one that's kind of like the size of a mouse, and it was flat. And I said, "Oh, that's a nice one." And the voice said, "Not that one." And I start laughing. I says, "Oh, they're funny." So I said, "I'll give it to a friend." I put it in my pocket. So then I found another one. I picked it up. And the voice said, "That one, the rock vibrates in my hand."
What?
It vibrates in my hand. I'll bring it to you when I see you. And when I got home, I don't know why, I put it out in my driveway and got my tri-field meter to see what's going on. It registers a 4. It's a rock. So what this rock, so whatever did this download, it was some kind of entity from Skinwalker Ranch, and I felt it was interdimensional. But it was standing next to me, like in the shadows, and it had olive-shaped eyes. So I don't know what it was.
You've introduced the subject of Skinwalker Ranch, so let's get into that a bit. Some people have simply heard that there's this real strange place in America called Skinwalker Ranch. Others have read the books. Some have visited. How did you first hear about this wonderfully unnerving location? And can you tell us a bit about your first visit?
I haven't been to the ranch yet. I've been up to the gates many times. I'm going there, but I haven't got there yet because I have to see what this person is talking to me about. And there's also a native spirit that talks to me from the ranch. All these spirits and entities from the ranch are talking to me, and I don't know why. Like they're trying to show me something. I'm not sure. They like halfway show me. I get little bits and pieces, and I go, what about when you get here?
Yeah.
And I keep saying, I'm not coming. It's not like I live down the street, it's 1,800 miles.
Do we know, I'm sure somebody does, how large this ranch is? As far as I understand, it's huge.
315 acres, I think.
Oh, okay. That's good size.
Yeah.
And many reports for many years of unusual activity, unusual beings, unexplained events. And let's see, can you tell us what you and Ryan were able to establish in your work on this book?
He says, let's write a book about Skinwalker Ranch. And I says, let's see, what do I want to write about? And I says, okay. I said, who were all the people that ever lived on that property? We know the people that, but then they're 20 years ago. Who was all the people before that? So I went to the office in Vernal, Utah, and I got all the land deeds, everybody that has ever worked there, lived there. I got their names, and then here I'm going to Ancestry again, looking people up. I got their book. I got their pictures. I could tell you, where they came from. Some didn't come from Utah. Some came from some other state, and what their jobs were, and all. It was important. These were just regular people that came there looking for a dream, and they found something else. That's how I put it.
What a great avenue of research to charge into. I don't think that would have occurred to many people. And it immediately interests me because all of a sudden you have human histories attached to whatever degree you want to dig down and find out about these people's lives. Perhaps they have living descendants. Perhaps there are diaries. I mean, who knows? It's a great way to dig in rather than just try to document the phenomena per se.
Because I found pictures on people's family trees, and I go, look at their. These are pictures that Brandon didn't have. I said, look, I got pictures for you. How cool is this?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And now the whole property is owned by who, do we know?
Brandon Fugal. Brandon
okay.
Fugal. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And thankfully, they do allow visitors.
Very seldom. Very seldom.
Regulated.
Very seldom.
Yeah. Wow. I want to move down here. Again, this is your new book.
Right.
And why, what led you to publish this book, and what can readers expect to find in it? I mean, I see.
I was actually writing another book, the book I'm doing now. And I woke up one morning and something said, no, you're supposed to write this book. No, you're supposed to, I had no idea I was writing this. No, you have to write this book. And then again, like when I did the Skinwalker Ranch, who are the people? I said, well, you hear everybody's stories about they saw a craft, they saw entities, they communicated with them, and life goes on as usual, but it doesn't. Yeah. And I wanted people to know what happened to these people after this happened. How did their lives change,
Before we went on, we were talking about this book, and I thought, what a great idea. When we talk about life-changing UFO paranormal events, we're often talking about big events, ones that have a public recognition, in fact, if they're well-known enough. But in fact, probably the greatest number of them are small events experienced often by just one person without any witnesses, where they're minding their business, living their life, and all of a sudden they're in the midst of a very paranormal, non-standard life experience that they may never understand, or they look up and there is a UFO of some sort, UAP, but you've never seen anything like it in your life. It absolutely defies everything you thought you might ever see in the sky, and you never forget it. In some cases, it can widen your perspective about the world and make you more open and more courageous. In other cases,
like the day I saw mine, I'm just going down the street and I just happened to look up at the sky, and the sky ripped open, and this craft came out of the sky, and the sky opened. How could the sky open?
Talk about that. It's a very specific description. Can you be a little more detailed about what you saw?
Yeah, because it was like it just ripped open, and this silver disc craft came out. Now, it was daytime, so I don't know if it had lights on it, but and I'm just looking at it, and I go, does nobody else see this? And maybe I'm the only one that was supposed to see it. Maybe I wasn't supposed to see it. People always say you weren't supposed to see something, like in Rendlesham Forest, you weren't supposed to see that. And I don't know how long I was looking at it, and it went right back into that hole, and the sky sealed up like nothing happened. And I go, what just happened? That was crazy.
I've only heard one other account like that, or described like that, and it just makes you wonder. What the heck? What are the physics?
Right. Because you hear about portals. Well, that had to be a portal, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a nice. They show nice round edges on the portals. Well, this just ripped. This was not nice.
And actually, a perfect place for us to take a break after our first hour. This is Peter Robbins with my special guest tonight, Cheryl Lynn Carter. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth, CE-5.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com.
Tickets are now on sale for Rebels of Disclosure 2025, May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois at the beautiful Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center. This will be a 4-day event with 12 speakers covering topics such as ET contact, experiencer testimonies, lost history, secret space programs, time travel, Illuminati, parallel realities, and so much more. Visit journeytotruth.online for more details.
And we are back. Peter Robbins here. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth, and my special guest tonight, Cheryl Lynn Carter. Welcome back, Cheryl.
Yeah.
I want to go back into your newest book, Chosen. It's a word that cuts both ways. And I was reminded as a boy, growing up in the Reformed Jewish tradition in Hebrew school, as young as like the second grade, 7 years old, that kind of thing, that the Jewish people are sometimes called the chosen people. And that sounds pretty good, but you children will learn more about 20th century history as you grow older, and that the word is not always something that one looks for. To be chosen in the sense of a UFO abduction or a powerful paranormal experience or a contact experience will leave somebody changed very often, and profoundly so.
Absolutely.
Also, for some people, and is it the nature of the intelligences they're dealing with, your own attitude or psychology, what factors enter into the experience that you have being positive or negative, as far as you're concerned, because that's all that really matters.
Mhm.
And of course, we know there's a huge database of research, peer, other groups have been maintaining for some decades, essentially devoted to people who have really positive experiences.
Mhm.
And then I guess, many people are aware of folks who are very freaked out by this. In writing this book, you seeked out experiencers, and I'm guessing, because I haven't read it, were you looking for a variety of experiences, or do you have, kind of an attitude or something, a philosophy or a point that you're trying to put forward, or just good, bad, let me have it, and lay it out for us? Can you give us? Can you share?
I was looking for a variety, and just like the Falcon Lake. This guy was a prospector. He was out looking for quartz. Just regular guy out there minding his own business. Somebody could be hunting or fishing. He was just regular sportsman out there when this happened to him. And to the day he died, he says keep saying, I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
He never said it was the UFO. Because
How?
he was in Canada and he used to be in the military, and he just, when this thing landed, he thought it was some kind of a U.S. secret craft, and they were in trouble. So he went over to see if he could help them. He had no idea what it was.
What did he actually encounter when he got to the spot?
Well, this hatch opened up, and he could hear like machinery inside and like voices, and he's yelling in all different languages, can I help you? And nothing. And then the hatch closed, and he was standing probably where the kind of exhaust was or something, and it burned him. He actually had a grid pattern on his shirt, on his skin, from this craft. It burned his glove because he touched the craft.
Even as you're speaking, other cases come to mind, and my first thought was, maybe it's because the first thing I want to think, but that this harm that came to him was not intentional.
No.
You get too close to a fire, or you can get burned. Were there any accounts that stay with you of the ones, individuals that you interviewed, where things changed in their perception of the world around them very much for the better?
I don't know if anybody says to the better. I don't think anybody was happy about what happened to him. I mean, his did though. He was always happy because he actually wrote a little 20-page book, which I found it in Canada. Canada is wonderful. Their archives are just great. I downloaded his little book. It's not in print anymore, but he did a little book about his experience, and then he just gave it to his friends.
Good for him. Good for him.
I think it said $1 on it, but he was giving it to his friends. But I was able to get it from Canada. Yeah, but he was happy about what happened. It's like I said, he doesn't believe it was a UFO.
Welcome to the club, as they say.
Yeah.
Before you wrote this book, you wrote this book. Mm-hmm. And when people hear the term triangle, often their mind goes to the first location of mystery where that phrase is used, namely the Bermuda Triangle. Mm-hmm. And it's a triangle. It's an area of real estate or property or over water, but it's defined by 3 points, generally speaking. And until I saw this book, I wasn't aware of quite a number of the triangles of activity. Did you approach this book like I've become familiar with 2 or 3 of these things. How many of them are there that I can document? Or how did you originally approach the idea for this book?
This is really funny. I was going to be on somebody's podcast, and I says, what do you want me to talk about? Well, I don't know. And I says, well, let me think. And I says, how about we talk about mysterious triangles around the United States? So I got like 12 of them. I said, here's half the list. You search those, I'll search those, and we'll have a good discussion. Well, the podcast never came about, so I wrote the book. That's how that came about.
Were you able to visit a number of these triangles, or basically you were doing your work from, printed materials and what you were finding online?
Well, I live in Michigan, and we have the Michigan Triangle. So yes, I've been to the. Yes.
And is it specifically a higher incidence of UFO activity, or UFO activity and general paranormal activity that define the Michigan Triangle?
See, another thing, when I was writing the book, I didn't realize how all these triangles had UFOs in them. That I wasn't looking for that at all. I was just looking for strange things. So there was a lot of UFOs in these triangles. Yeah. In Lake Michigan, there's something about the water. Yeah, it's dangerous water. Yeah, where ships can get lost. They can sink. That's true. But there are just so many missing ships, so many missing planes, people. There were ships found and no people were on them. Where'd the people go? Yeah.
This is an abiding mystery. I guess the best known is maybe 1870s, but the Mary Celeste, a full rigged ship that was on a routine voyage and was found adrift at sea with absolutely no one on board. And still one of the great sea mysteries of all time, as far as I'm concerned.
Or there was another ship, and they were getting close to their destination, and the captain says, "I'm going to go down and take a little nap. Let me know when we get close." So he's in his cabin with the door locked. So they're getting close. So they're knocking on the cabin. Hey, time to wake up. Wasn't answering. So they get in there, and he wasn't in there. Where'd he go? He had disappeared too.
The stuff that dreams are made of. A lot more questions than answers. In this book, can you share one other particularly memorable event relative to the Michigan Triangle?
Well, Illinois has, which I didn't know. I lived in Illinois my whole life, and there's down in southern Illinois, there's a triangle, which I didn't know. And I says, okay. So I actually did go down to visit that, because inside this triangle there's a place called Cahokia Mounds, which is a very, people should go visit that. That's a very interesting place. There, it was a whole civilization. There was 400 mounds left. I don't know how many there were. And as you're driving into this small town, you'll see there's a mound behind a gas station, a mound in somebody's backyard. They're still everywhere. So who knows how many they were, but it belongs to the government now, so you can't do anything. But yeah, it's amazing. And there was some of them, when they excavated them, there was like a ruler, I guess it was. And they had him on a bed of beads with wings. Like they think, that their ancestors came from the sky.
Yes. Well, a common part of a lot of heritages, for sure. I'm going to move over for now to your photography. As a fellow photographer, like any kind of creative artist, your interest drives you. And I think one of the most underrated creative forces in the universe's boredom. If we've mastered something or we've got it the way we want it, for many artists, they'll say, okay, I've got it. I can do this for the rest of my life and make a living. Others say, I've got it. I'm bored. I want to start on something brand new, which helped to tank part of my career as a gallery artist. I just kept finding more interest in what I hadn't done than in mastering what I have done. And I wanted to begin with a few strictly nature photographs. Photographing animals in the wild is a trip. Photographing your pet cat. It's very dependent on your subject.
Yes, you got to get that right moment.
Which usually means taking 100 pictures.
Exactly.
And maybe one of them.
I took 100 pictures. Exactly.
It's actually one of the wonders of the age of digital photography. I remember so well back in the age of regular analog photographs, loading up my Nikon with a roll of Kodachrome and going, okay, I've got 36 photographs. Each one of them is going to cost 28 cents to process.
Yeah. And then you go, I hope my pictures came out. And then you had to wait a few days to get them. And then you find out they didn't.
It's, to people that have grown up with digital photography, it means nothing. But of course, it was just this whole cycle. And did I get it? And
and then you went home and you didn't get it. And now you can't go back. Now with digital, now you can, that didn't work. Let me take another one.
Now that luxury of just you can keep shooting like a professional photographer who's film is an expense they can write off.
Yeah.
Hello.
That's my squirrel buddy. Yeah. He's easy to photograph. He poses for me. He comes to my house asking for peanuts.
So this is a paid model. And I love the way the light is catching on those wonderful little ears.
I know.
Okay, this is more formidable looking. Is this a hedgehog or a
it's a hedgehog. Yeah, a hedgehog. Yeah.
Okay, it's just a very determined look with a lot of character. How close were you to this guy?
Not very close. I got to zoom on my camera.
That's a wise thing.
Mama wouldn't let the baby. Yeah, Mama wouldn't let you get close to the baby.
But
I took a lot of pictures before I got his tongue sticking out.
A good one. And these wonderful little creatures. I remember as a kid, when you're just the miracle of creation is caught up in an insect, and then learning a little more, and that this design has proved surfaceable enough that we have the pretty much exact same insect in the fossil record from 100 million years ago, and it worked. So why improve on the model? But each one of them, a perfect little miracle. Another very
the infamous
graceful
fish fly. Oh, we hate those things. Oh my gosh.
Oh, for me, very exotic.
When they come, they're just everywhere, and they get on your clothes, and they itch, and they've got very beautiful wings.
I will remember that.
That's Lake Erie.
Remember when I was young and visited the Great Lakes for the first time, like most people, I think of a lake as relatively manageable. I grew up very close to the Atlantic Ocean, and you looked out from the beach, and of course you didn't expect to see Europe. But to stand on the edge of a lake and know it is so big that you can't see the other side any more than you can see the other side of the ocean was rather humbling for me.
And the waves were coming in that night. My gosh.
Yeah. I like that you really, in this series, you chose very elemental. We have earth, sea, and sky all coming together the way that they do. And you didn't seek out some beautiful formation. This is just the way it is. It has its
Yeah, I
own
was just
sense of
looking at
beauty.
the sand, and I go, the sand is so beautiful here.
Yes. Yeah. And something we can, like watching a bonfire burn, watching the waves come in and go out and come in and go out. When I see this, my first thought as somebody who was trained to be a painter is how challenging that would be to paint.
Yeah. Can't you just hear that splashing? Yeah.
Yes.
Look at
absolutely.
the sand. Just look at the sand. How beautiful.
It is. It is.
It's
And
got
you
so
think
many
about the
textures.
forces.
Yeah, so many textures.
Yep. And the wind basically is the designer.
Mm-hmm.
Then you took a series of really interesting pictures after this very traditional landscape, and very lush it is. But what were you photographing here, and what process did you use?
This is a process called mirroring, where you can take one of your photos and mirror and get really something strange.
Yeah.
If you turn it the other way, it's the fort in Fort Wayne, Detroit.
Okay.
And because you can see the fort on the side, and it's the grass. But if you mirror your photos, sometimes you'll get interesting things like there's some kind of figures in there.
I'll say. Yeah, it's also that the term pareidolia, looking for representative, real life things in random patterns.
Yeah,
great
that's
to
what it
see
looked like before it went black and white. Yeah.
the difference that going black and white makes.
Mm-hmm.
You only have to watch a movie to be reminded of that.
That's another one that I mirrored too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the trees and the water. Yeah.
And immediately reminiscent of Monet, who probably made water lilies more famous than any other painter in the world. It's a lovely shot. Okay.
I love doing these. These are really hard to do.
Is this a regular like soap bubble, or is it glass?
It's a crystal ball. I bought it on Amazon. It's a crystal ball.
Okay, I couldn't tell.
Yeah, it's really heavy, but I mean it's really hard to get a good reflection. You got to take a lot of photos. You got to be just in the right place. To get your
got one there.
Yeah, wow. It's hard. These are all taken in a cemetery.
Oh, that's what we're seeing in the background. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm in a cemetery. It's sitting on a gravestone right there. That's Bryce Canyon.
One of the most photographed corners of the world, and who knows how many films have been filmed there.
Mm-hmm.
Almost have a humanity to them, especially the one on the left. Bang.
That's the fort.
Yeah. Obviously has seen better times.
And I can't believe I caught that bird flying. I didn't see him there.
I was going to say, that
I didn't plan that. It just came in.
Well, thank you, Central Casting. Perfect placement.
Yeah, it was.
Where are we?
That is one of the casemates at the fort. And I just happened to catch the light at the right time.
Yeah. Very powerful.
Because it doesn't really look like that all the time.
Yeah. Oh, sure. And then we move into the world of your black and white shots.
That's another cemetery. That's one of the old gates at a cemetery.
Uh-huh. One of the oldest of human activities, piling one rock on top of another one.
Mm-hmm.
Where is this located?
That's Eloise Asylum in Michigan.
And from the look of the windows, I'm guessing that's completely deserted.
Oh yeah, that's very haunted too.
Have you conducted any investigations in there, or is it sealed to the
Several
public?
times, yeah. Several times, yes.
Oh, can you share an experience or what you found on the most memorable?
This is like a classic. We were up on the third floor,
Mm-hmm.
and they had like offices, and it was the X-ray room up there. So I was walking by, and it had the X-ray room, and there's some old X-rays in there, but the envelopes were empty.
Mm.
And I heard somebody over by the window walking, like shuffling their feet.
Mm.
And I looked over there and didn't see anything. And I came back and I heard the shuffling again. And so I'm telling the person I'm with, I said, there's somebody over there still working. I hear them shuffling their feet. And she wasn't interested. She didn't want to hear. I said, okay. So then I went over and I said, anybody still working here? I had my recorder going.
Mm-hmm.
I says, anybody working tonight? And a man's voice said, yes.
Mm.
And I said, well, do you need any help with filing these x-rays? He goes, yes, somebody didn't come in tonight. I mean, we had a conversation.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I smelled cigarette smoke and I said, are you supposed to be smoking in here? And he laughed. And so, yeah.
First question. You were there with one or two other people?
Another person, but she wasn't
Okay.
interested in what was going on. She said, there's nothing happening in there. I said, okay.
And she was not a smoker.
I said, you don't smell the smoke? Yeah. I said, well, are you smoking? I'm not smoking. And so then I just kept the recorder going for a while, and I went home and I'm listening to it. And I said, what is that strange sound? I know that sound. What is that? I'm hearing a strange sound. And I played it for one of my friends, and he said, I used to work in a hospital. He goes, that's the sound of an empty gurney going down the hallway.
Oh, my.
There were no gurneys in that building. Perfectly clear. Somebody was pushing an empty gurney down the hallway.
Very poignant.
That was just wonderful. I got that.
Again, we don't know, can't prove that what we're talking about here is a function of some mystical aspect of reality, or that it's governed by laws as real as that water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. But we just don't know how to make our way to establish.
And that could have just been a snippet in time. That doesn't mean somebody was still working there. It could have just been a sound that was caught in time.
Yeah.
We're talking now, and someday somebody just might pick up something we're saying. It's just a snippet. Doesn't mean that the person is still there. I find that fascinating. That why that sound would just be there for a second.
I briefly want to describe a situation to you and get your take on it. Mm-hmm. A bed and breakfast that I stayed at for many years in Suffolk, England. Wonderful people, still good friends, ran it. And the main frame of the house was from the 1700s, but the original part was constructed in the late 16th century, late 1500s, which for a visiting American was, very dramatic. And the owners told me of a series of events that really, a bed and breakfast in many respects is a good testing ground. People are coming and going that have no relationship to each other. Right. In this case, from different countries, for different reasons. Suffolk has certainly had a very large presence, American military, people visiting or returning, a very famous location for bird watchers, and, filled with wonderful historic buildings like so much of England. And one morning, guests who were staying there from another part of Europe came down, and asked the hosts who that woman was that they observed from their bedroom window walking through their backyard the night before. And the host asked them to describe the individual. Said, well, it's a woman in a long kind of old-fashioned nightgown, and she really wasn't walking as much as kind of coasting. And come to think of it, she seemed self-illuminated. There was no lights on outside, and we were wondering. And the host just, I don't know. Very interesting. A year or so later, the same description from people who could have never known the first people, just as I said it, and long hair as well. And at another time, the youngest of their three sons was just using the bathroom at night, and at breakfast came down and said, Mom, who is that nice woman I saw in the hallway last night? My friend, knowing that there were no guests at the place, asked her son to describe this woman. Said, well, she's ever so nice, and smiled at me. And she just kind of glowed, and you could kind of see through her. And she wouldn't answer my questions, but, she was nice. And I have to base my first take on the character of the people who communicated the story to me, which is without question, and that they certainly weren't doing it to just get a rise out of me or fool me. Mm-hmm. And it stays with me. It's a classic, I know, and this presence is part of that house, or it certainly was. Your first thoughts, I'm sure you've dealt with similar situations, but what's up with that?
Well, maybe that woman lived there at one time. I find that a lot, yes. Or sometimes I've encountered a spirit that there used to be a building on the site before this present building was there, and they're from the first building.
Uh-huh.
Now, I find that interesting when that happens.
A great shot here.
That's from Eloise. See, I just saw that, and I go, look at how the paint is peeling. That is so cool.
Yeah. It's great. And it's a really interesting composition. You've got everything you need.
See, there's that glass I was telling you about.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a broken glass. No, look at that.
And that special glass that, has a chicken wire embedded in it.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's Madison Seminary up on the 4th floor. That's a classic photo there.
I guess. Also a building now deserted.
That used to be an asylum. Uh-huh. So there's all kinds of different spirits still there. Yeah.
Imagination can really take off.
There's my spider web I was telling you about.
Great old stairway. Ivy does tell a story about time. Every once in a while you see a building covered with ivy, and occasionally on social networking, and then you see it's been removed like in one giant piece.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's a building. Okay. Very haunting looking.
Yeah, you go, what happened in that chair? Just an old school bus there, but I mean, look, when you do black and white, how cool it looks.
Definitely a fixer-upper. Yeah. Time has had its way with that.
And I love railroad tracks. I love old railroad tracks.
Yeah. It's funny. There are probably people in America who may not have ever seen railroad tracks.
True.
We've let our railroads, kind of fall by the way as we glorify cars and individual modes of traffic. But boy, what these things say with their reality and as a symbol for what could be the future.
Mm-hmm.
Cemetery.
Yeah, and that marker was just on top of the hill all by itself. I don't know why.
Yeah. And one that I absolutely love. Yow.
That's all that's left of the sanitarium. There, I found the little parts of the foundation and stuff.
Oh. Well,
But when I
all
was
the
going
more.
down the trail, interesting, when I was going down the trail, I found tree structures that maybe Bigfoot was there.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And what made you feel that?
Well, I took probably 6 or 7 pictures, and I showed it to Russell from Expedition Bigfoot, and he goes, "Oh yeah, that's the real stuff."
What I really admired about this photo, and it's a crapshoot
Because this
to
is out in
show
the
up.
woods, this is out in the woods, so it could be.
Yeah, but that fog in the background
Mm-hmm.
really lends just the right note, from a photographer's point of view. That's a great image. So we're at a point right now where, thinking back to when you first started to think about UFOs and your early paranormal experiences, did we ever think we'd get to a time where the House of Representatives is holding ongoing hearings about the UFO UAP question involving well-known elected officials from both sides of the aisle? And we seem to be in this process that we'll call disclosure.
Yeah, hopefully.
Your thoughts on this as it's developed and where we're going, and do you think we're going to be seeing actual disclosure with government leaders, addressing their people, possibly, timed so that it all happens together about this, and that we then move into, a new era, or that it's going to continue and a new administration doesn't make that much difference? Your thoughts, even just intuitively?
Because one of the people in my book, Mario Woods, he was from South Dakota, and he actually did talk about his experience to Congress. So that's in my book. Yeah, I believe that. I don't know. I think the administration wants to show us stuff, but is there something that's going to stop him? Because Kennedy wanted to show us too.
Well, that's one of the theories, and it may well be true.
Right.
There's so many what ifs.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts as an witness, as an experiencer, as a chronicler of other people's information and stories about either what this is all leading to, or whether or not you see the UFO phenomena, the spirit phenomena, Bigfoot, and other outsider subjects as actually related to each other, or completely separate, but just all in the compartment of weird and unusual?
I think they're all separate, and some things are interdimensional. Now we got to talk about interdimensional entities and stuff like that. And something when we're talking about the translucent woman, I want to tell you what I do. People laugh at me. I ask the spirit, okay, you look like you're see-through to me, but wherever you are you solid, and do I look see-through to you? How do we know? Maybe they're really solid over there. Maybe we look like the ghost to them. But they never answer me. It's like they can't tell me.
Have any of the spirits, the entities, that you have interfaced with, communicated to you, what it is like on the other side. Probably one of the most asked, even if it's asked quietly by people to themselves, what happens after we die?
It's like they're not allowed to tell us. I ask that question. I do.
Fair enough. If there's
when I said, "Do I look see-through to you?" They don't answer me either. It's like, oh, you have to wait and find out. You know, because where do we go when we die? Do we go up and down, or do we just go to a dimension on the side?
right.
We don't know, right? We don't know. There's so many dimensions. We don't. You know, or sometimes you'll say, "Oh, this spirit's voice is really loud because they're stronger, and this one is soft because they're weaker." Well, maybe one's in a dimension closer to us because that's why they're louder.
Fair enough.
All these strange questions.
Yeah. All you can do is make your best educated guesses based on your experience, your knowledge, and what you seem to be putting together. One wonders what spirits on the other side might be making of people who are obsessed with that other side when they're going to find out soon enough.
Well, I says that, you know, and you know, when you go to these places, you know, be respectful because what do they think about people that are goofing around and taking selfies while, you know?
Yeah.
It's, you know, when I'm investigating, you don't see me go on Facebook Live. That's disrespectful, I think, you know.
You brought up a very important question here, I think, which is that in good part because of the history of television shows and documentaries, some more successful or better made or bigger budgets than others, all of these subjects have now become not just that much more accessible, even if what you're accessing is not quality material, but for a lot of people, it's kind of transcended its area of specialty, esoteric studies to become entertainment. It's just another kind of
becomes
entertainment.
a sport. And I don't look at it that way. It's not a sport.
Yeah, but for some people, there are so many groups, so many clubs, organizations, groups of friends who kind of charter themselves as ghost hunters, and sometimes with very poignant and very moving accounts. Other times it just seems like sort of a social thing. And, you know, I'm open-minded. I'm a member of a ghost hunter group, and, you know, we've got a podcast and all that. As opposed to the real, it's a one-to-one area of study. It doesn't matter how many, you know, people you have with you or what kind of hardware or great, you know, scientific tools. I guess the thing, your most valuable tool is your common sense. Yes. And
I says it's me, my recorder. My recorder is my number one piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And it's analog because the tape will pick up sounds that a digital recorder will not.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that because I've had people with a digital standing next to me and they didn't get what I got, you know, so that. And I don't believe in all the blinky red light things. And what does that mean?
I have to ask you, do you still use audio cassettes?
Yes, sir, absolutely. That's all I use.
Where do you get them? Are they still being made?
Yeah, Amazon.
Outstanding. Of course. Where else?
Yeah. Well, I used to get them at Staples, and Staples didn't carry them anymore. But that's all I use. That's all I use. Yes.
Now, certainly what I used for many years, and you know, quality is still outstanding. If a younger person who has a similar interest, even if it's not rooted in the kind of experiences you had as a young person, is interested in getting into this, studying the paranormal, developing a case, learning the procedures. What advice would you give them?
Go visit old cemeteries. Take your recorder with you, because I've noticed when you go to old cemeteries, they don't get visitors, and they like that you came to see them. And there might be somebody there that wants to tell you a story. Have your recorder going. Even if you're not talking, they might be talking it to you. I picked up voices when saying something to me and I wasn't talking at all.
Let me ask you something. Do you feel that your ability that you discovered at 4 years old is something that's trainable? That if somebody really, I know that talking about hereditary on a certain level in your family on a matriarchal side, but do you think, say, like remote viewing, that these are skills that you can be taught, or either you've got it or you don't got it?
Well, there's two different ways to remote view. Like mine is just my ability I was born with. And then there's remote viewing that the Army actually does.
Right.
You can be taught to do the other kind of remote viewing. Usually they have a target, and then somebody's going to draw a picture of what this is. But when I work on missing person cases, I can actually go to the last place where the person was and see everything around me. That's how my remote, almost like I'm putting myself there. The other remote viewing, you're not putting yourself there.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I will say first, the first time I heard about remote viewing was really inadvertent. I had come in early to work for Bud Hopkins, and there was a book on his desk that had one of the wildest book covers I had ever seen in my life, and the title was Penetration. And it was about remote viewing. And when Bud came in, I made a joke about it because it just looked so loopy, and it wasn't anything that I'd ever heard about. And he asked me, have I ever heard about remote viewing? And I said no. And that was my first lesson in taking it seriously.
See, I didn't know what I did was even called remote viewing. I didn't know what it was. Probably a few years ago, I heard that term. I didn't know what I did.
It's so interesting how our minds can adapt to what we're talking about here, or almost have a fit in rejecting it. All of us, I think you'll agree, we need to keep our skeptical facilities sharp. The fact that we're involved in this work to the degree that we are, in no way should tag us as believers, a term that's often used to belittle. When people say, and I'm sure you've had similar explanations, do you believe in UFOs? And said, well, it's like asking me if I believe in the screen I'm looking at here or the chair I'm sitting in. Right. I've seen them, and I have seen evidence of them. So the word belief doesn't enter into it. This is not some mystical thing. This is a real thing. In that big umbrella of things called UFOs and unidentified aerial phenomena, a bit more ambiguous, there are many explanations and possibly quite a variety of intelligences. The ones, though, the intelligences that have become generally known as grays, and are the operative ones conducting abductions, generally speaking. Do you feel that they are self-directed, or they're working at the behest of a higher intelligence? And what do you think they're after? I'm sure you're familiar with many accounts.
Well, see, and I think, just like us, like we're all different. I think that they're coming from different planets, different systems, and that's why they all look different. I'm not sure where the grays might come from. And like in my book, when they some of them saw these, they would see the small entities, which are maybe 5 feet tall, but there was something that was 7 feet tall that was kind of in command, telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And that one even looked different. So yeah, what are the grays? Do they have somebody telling them what to do? Who knows?
My assumption is that they're laboratory manufactured and in the service of another intelligence and gathering information for their own purposes. At this point, you've now got 10 books under your belt. Yeah. Do you see your next book on the horizon already, or this is kind of a time in between and you're not?
I'm working on one right now as we speak. Yes. The one that I set aside before I was doing Chosen.
I don't want you to tell us much about it, because sometimes the effect of, well, it's nice to keep secrets and to work on your own, but can you tell us anything about the next book that we'll be seeing from you, Cheryl?
Well, it's called The Celestial Code, and it's about ancient megalithic sites and their map to the stars. Because of all the star systems out there, why did the ancient ones really focus on and almost adore 3 star systems? Pleiades, Arcturus, and Orion. And you will find them in the Bible. They talk about these 3 star systems in the Bible. Why were these so important? Did our ancestors come from these places? We shall find out.
That sounds like a great project. And so many wonderful locations for reference. Stonehenge, like you mentioned, which really, I guess, is emblematic. If you say name a Neolithic site, that's the one that most people who have no real interest in standing stones and ancient burial mounds and all that will go to. Have you had the opportunity to visit Stonehenge and some of the other?
I haven't. No, I wish.
Well, I hope you do. I hope you do. Have you visited the Snake Mound in Ohio?
Many times. Serpent Mound, yes, many times.
I remember seeing an aerial photograph of that when I was a kid and just going, what? It just blew my mind. I've yet to get there. But
and it's right on the edge of the Serpent Mound impact crater, where this big meteor fell to Earth, and it turned the Earth upside down, because the layer that you see on top belongs in the middle of the Earth, and the top is down below. It turned it upside down. And it's about 5 miles. I've been down to the impact crater. They're called fissures, where there you can see the different layers. I get to pick up fissures there. It was so cool. And there's actually a part where you're walking along the serpent. My friend told me to make sure I took a compass, not your phone compass, a real compass with a needle.
Yeah. And
if you walk around the serpent, there's a certain part where your needle will go crazy.
Really?
So I start walking, and I'm walking north, and I came around the first curve of the serpent, and all of a sudden my needle said, nope, north is behind you. And I kept walking, and everything was okay, and I came right back to that spot. No, north is behind you. So why it does it in that spot, I don't know.
Wow. That's great. That's great.
And the energy there is just so peaceful. I can't even explain. It's just.
Yeah. I I'm just so thankful that there's so much of it left, because as we know, really all over the world, ancient sites have been deconstructed, either because it was not appreciated or because it was seen as a powerful location that you didn't want your enemies to have access to, or like all of the ancient standing stones all across the United Kingdom, many of which were dismantled in the early days of monotheism because they were seen as the past or a threat to this new order or new belief. You can almost be sure that ancient churches in England sit on a location that had great importance to the locals before it was put up. And it was quite wide.
They're all on ley lines.
It's the real estate. Let's just take down this damn big rock and put up this thing we're going to call a church and get people into it, and let's build up Christianity in this era, in this area. Boy.
If you notice, there's a ley line that goes through England called the St. Michael's line, and there's churches built all along the ley line.
Yeah, there are a number of them that go right across, and the ones that intrigue me most, and years before I had any conscious interest in UFOs, this was the subject that really excited me, that there were these old straight tracks at diagonals just straight across. Right. And in some cases, they picked up on the French coast in like Karnak, exactly in the same line, which you have to ask yourself, amazing as these things are on the island of Britain, the United Kingdom, that how the hell, it does suggest that there was an overview that somebody had access to lay these out. It certainly wasn't random. It couldn't have been. The questions about how much we knew back in the day, and all of the information that's been lost.
And so why completely. Did we forget? Why did we forget everything? That's baffling.
Lots of possible reasons, but from the time I started to educate myself more about ancient civilizations and the potential for older ancient civilizations that, were laid waste by earth-changing events 40,000 years ago, or a nuclear war 60,000 years ago, take your pick, that the layers of mysteries and in our imaginations, in our minds, and in reality are all there to kind of still be farmed. And even with all of the ancient burial sites they found all across Egypt, it's still estimated that there are probably more than all the ones that have been discovered waiting to be discovered. If only humanity would turn more attention to these exciting, peaceful pursuits about knowing ourselves better, rather than trying to think of wonderful new ways to vaporize us all in a split second because somebody looks at you cross-eyed, and you've got to defend your territory. Any last thoughts as we come into the end of the show?
I'm going to have Machu Picchu in Karnak. Those are some the pyramids. Those are part of this book that I'm writing. It's fascinating. I'm getting into this stuff and going, wow.
It sounds like as you are discovering things, it's going to be a better and better book for somebody that really is not familiar with this, to have an introduction and to move forward from there. That's actually a very important place to have. So many people don't get deeper involved in the strange, the unusual, and the esoteric just because it's awkward. If there's something that lets you take that first step in with comfort, more power to them, and more power to you, Cheryl.
All these stones are lined up. They're not just lined up; they are lined up for a reason.
Yeah, and Cheryl, you have a website where people can go to learn more about you and your work.
It's www.CherylLynnCarter.com.
There you go.
Pretty easy.
CherylLynnCarter.com.
Mhm.
And that's Lynn, no E.
Yes. Yes.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. Peter Robbins here. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. My guest tonight has been Cheryl Lynn Carter. Stay well. Stand up for what you believe in. We'll see you back here next week.